Which of these stories will you be talking about tomorrow? Torturing detainees, not just at black sites, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, at Gitmo, completely contradicting what the Bush administration repeatedly claimed.
First of all, whatever we have done was legal.
This government does not torture people.
We don't torture.
Any activity we conduct is within the law. We do not torture.
Countdown contributor Jeremy Scahill on the conclusive proof that we tortured and that Bush was lying. And the lawsuit against Donald Rumsfeld that claims we abducted and detained a U.S. Army translator and held him without charge for 9 months outside Baghdad. Nice debt deal. As investors realize the Republican win means there'll be no government money to fuel a recovery, the Dow Jones sheds another 513 points, the worst drop in 2 years and 10 months. An explanation from Paul Krugman of the New York Times. But business is perfect at WSPAN LLC. Formed in March, donated $1 million to the Romney campaign in June, went out of business in July. Mitt's funny money. Newt's funny Twitter account, 92% of his 1.6 million followers are not real. Fox owns Up. The network gives preferential treatment to Scylla.
If I say something bad and I see her in the hallway, I feel really awkward and wrong, so I just kind of say, that was a good job.
Good job, this guy. Builds an atomic reactor in his kitchen out of stuff he bought on eBay. And mission control, this is Mars landing base. Over. Go ahead, Mars landing base. Over. We have mud on Mars, please. Over. Derek Pitts on watching the newfound mud dry on Mars and what it means about life there. All that and more now on Countdown.
Yes, very curious.
Good evening from New York. This is Thursday, August 4th, 460 days until the 2012 presidential election. And tonight, new evidence that the torture horrors of the Bush administration were actually worse than was known or perhaps even suspected. The first evidence that torture, specifically waterboarding, was done not in the legally murky so-called black sites, but in American military facilities, specifically at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. In our fifth story on the Countdown tonight, allegations that U.S. military interrogators may have gone beyond even the heretofore euphemistically described enhanced interrogation techniques, such as slamming prisoners into walls, forced nudity, or hanging them by their wrists in stress positions. The Truth Out website reporting that variations on waterboarding, seen here in a demonstration, were used by the military in violation of U.S. military and civilian law, as well as of the Geneva Conventions. Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense throughout much of the Bush administration, insisting
no one was waterboarded at Guantanamo by the U.S. military. In fact, no one was waterboarded at Guantanamo, period.
In fact, Rumsfeld claims U.S. military interrogators did not use the waterboard anywhere in the world. However, Rumsfeld's denial may simply be a play on words by the man who described the chaos following Baghdad's fall as stuff happens. A report by 2 doctors who examined files of 9 Guantanamo prisoners found evidence of torture and mistreatment of all 9, including, quote, the near asphyxiation by water of one, and another having had his head shoved in a toilet. And in May 2008, the House Foreign Affairs Committee had heard testimony from former detainee Murat Kurnaz, who claims he was subjected to waterboarding without the board while a U.S. military prisoner in Afghanistan.
In your testimony, you suggest that you were waterboarded in your captivity. Is that correct?
No, it's not waterboarding. It's called water treatment.
You were.
There was a bucket. There was a bucket of water.
Was a cloth put over your face, and you were put on a board?
There was.
What type?
There was a bucket of water, and they stick my head in.
5 seconds.
And at the same time, they passed into my stomach.
Which led a Pentagon spokesman to reply, quote, "The abuses Mr. Kurnaz alleges are not only unsubstantiated and implausible, they are simply outlandish." Of course, President Bush and Vice President Cheney have proudly admitted they approved the waterboarding of 9/11 plotter Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and al-Qaeda senior Lieutenant Abu Zubaydah and the plotter behind the bombing of the USS Cole, Abd al-Rahim al-Nashri.
The lawyer said it was legal. He said it did not fall within the Anti-Torture Act. I'm not a lawyer, but you got to trust the judgment of people around you, and I do.
And to suggest that it's torture, I just think is wrong.
If the lawyer said you should jump off the bridge. I'm joined now by Jeremy Scahill, national security reporter for the magazine The Nation, Countdown contributor, who's followed, obviously, Guantanamo and the torture stories extensively. Good to see you, sir.
Nice to be here.
All right, explain how our understanding of our history with torture by this country has just been advanced by this story.
Well, I think, first of all, one of the things that remains missing from this is the fact that the Bush administration authorized extrajudicial killings around the world in addition to the torture that the details on torture that we're now learning. What we're seeing is that the Bush administration really played semantics here. The fact was that they were using water as a method to torture people. Whether it was defined as waterboarding or called waterboarding is a different story. One of the cases that I've been investigating for a couple of years is one prisoner who had a hose shoved up his nose at Guantanamo, and then the water turned on at full throttle, shooting into his nose, putting prisoners' heads in toilets and then repeatedly flushing it. What we're learning are more sick details of torture tactics that most certainly were authorized and advocated at the highest levels of the Bush administration.
What does it do that this is now placed in Gitmo, in our facilities in Iraq and Afghanistan, as opposed to those nebulous kind of almost, in a bizarre way, almost benign, because we don't really know very much about them, black sites?
Right. Well, the difference there would be that the black sites were traditionally believed to be run by the Central Intelligence Agency. What this shows is complicity by military personnel as well as contractors that worked for places like Lockheed Martin and others that were working at Guantanamo. There's another facility where torture took place, and that was Camp Nama in Baghdad, which was a facility run by U.S. Special Operations Forces that was investigated by Human Rights Watch, but no one has been held effectively accountable for the torture that took place there. And unfortunately, the Obama administration has an extremely poor record on holding those accountable for these acts in courts of law and elsewhere.
What do we know about things going on there now? Because the president obviously had promised and made a significant part of his campaign that he was going to close Guantanamo Bay, and it was not closed. Do we know that things are different there now? Well,
in talking to lawyers from the Center for Constitutional Rights and from Reprieve, the two main organizations that have represented prisoners there, what we understand is that one of the forces used to de facto torture prisoners at Guantanamo, which was a sort of military police force known as the Immediate Reaction Force, the IRF they were called, would do something called IRFing prisoners, a 5-man detail going to a cell, and they would douse the prisoner in his cell with chemical agents. Then each of the military police officers would go in with a different body part assigned to them. They would then hog tie the prisoner and restrain them. Sometimes they would take them and then leave them in an outdoor cage while blazing sun was hitting them in Guantanamo. The Obama administration claims that this force is now under control. Human Rights Watch, human rights lawyers and others are very concerned that it is continuing. It would need an independent investigation at Guantanamo under the Obama administration. And let's remember, as we hear all this, Keith, that the Republicans love to say, and some Democrats, how great Guantanamo is. They have health care there. They have food there. You know, it's held up in that manner. Guantanamo is a hellish place, and these heinous acts took place there as well as at black sites around the world.
This force, this IRF force, is this something other than the extreme repression force? Is that something secondary?
Well, you know, an Army chaplain, James Yee, who was based at Guantanamo, has said numerous times that he believes that it was used as a punitive device rather than something to respond to a crisis. So that's why I bring it up in the context of this torture. Not only James Yee, but prisoners who were there, as well as lawyers who visit with prisoners, have described this force being used to punish prisoners who don't comply with the simplest orders. So it's a massive overreaction to the littlest act of defiance on the part of prisoners. It's a misuse of this kind of a force, according to veteran military police officers who have spoken out publicly about this, saying that it's despicable that this force is being used in this way.
All right, contextualize this for us. Is there any indication that anything can be done in terms of bringing people to justice at this late date? Is there anything internationally, anything with the United Nations? Is there any investigation going on?
The U.S. doesn't recognize international law when it comes to U.S. personnel. The Obama administration started off on a strong note, saying that we're going to end these practices. Not only have the practices largely not ended, none of these guys are being held accountable. I know you're going to be talking about a lawsuit against Rumsfeld. The Obama administration has consistently intervened on Rumsfeld's behalf and on behalf of other Bush administration officials that have been sued for torture and other acts, and has gone in to get them off the hook. And the Obama administration needs to be called out on that. Unfortunately, people are so blinded by partisanship in this country that when it comes to defending the Constitution or defending the rule of law, we don't have much consistency, particularly in an election season.
Yeah, well, I don't really care about that in this context, so we're going to go full speed ahead on this.
Good for you.
Jeremy Scahill, national security reporter for The Nation, and we're proud to say Countdown contributor. Again, great thanks.
Thank you.